Well, hello there, this is Shane from Shane's Reviews, and I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're going to be talking about The Talisman from Stephen King, and the reason why is because Jose Bro asked, is this book anything like The Talisman on the video for Fairytale? And it was a great question, so I dumped the book that I was reading at the time and picked up The Talisman and went through it. So thank you, Jose, for the question, because now we have another video. But essentially, I've already replied to it, and it's one of those things where I feel like there's enough similarities that, yes, there could be a correlation there, but Stephen King, the way that he works is that there's a lot of stuff in his different universes that all tie together. So in the in the Dark Tower, with Rose, there's a lot of things throughout other books that tie into it. There's a big similarity in between the baddies having RF in their names, etc. But there's certainly not the same book, for sure. And I was kind of expecting, whenever I went back and I read The Talisman, to see huge, portions that were the same. About the only similarities is that it's about a young kid that comes into his own. And then he goes on an adventure, and the adventure is that he has to go into the other side of things. Like, the whole reason why I brought up the Dark Tower is because of this one specific thing. It's that this kid can go into this hotel because he's the only person in all the dimensions that is himself. So instead of it being that in this place there's a Jason, in this place there's a Jason, in this place there's a Jason, and all those places there is no Jason, only him. So because of that, and him not having any twinners or etc., he's able to get in. And it makes me think of the spokes. It makes me think of the way that the Dark Tower was laid out originally, because of all these multiple worlds, multiple dimensions that have the same people, just a little bit different, working as a team, working as a whole. And I don't mean that they're actually working together. I mean that in the grand revolving spokes, the grand world as it goes around, the whole universe and universes, the whole multiverse of this book and the universes that Stephen King has created, that one person is an individual throughout all. So whenever he travels, it's not like he's flipping with another person or another version or this, that, and the other. It's that he himself is the only one present there. So that was very interesting to see. And I don't remember reading this book in the past. So Jose Bro, thank you for asking that question, because I got to read something that I think is probably one of the better sci-fi things that I ever took in with the Stephen King twist. So thank you for that. Now, the rest of the information about the book, I know that was a very long, meandering opening, if you will. Let me get back here to this. The name of the book is, of course, The Talisman, which was wrote by Stephen King and Peter Straub. And it was narrated by Frank Muller. And it was a long listen. It was 28 hours, but we got all the way through it. And the things that are really important about this, and the differences in between this and Fairytale, is in the Fairytale, the person that's gone on the adventure kind of got thrown into it because of love for an animal. He wanted to try to save the dog that he became so very attached to. Now, in the Talisman, the difference is that the kid is trying to save not only his mom, but the Queen of the Territories, which is his mom's twin in the other place. And to do this, he has to find the talisman, and then he has to cure pretty much the both of them. And they're so much removed from each other, because in Fairytale, you've got this gladiator type society that the main protagonist gets stuck in and has to fight through. He has to become the prince. Well, this one, in the Talisman, he doesn't have to become the prince. He already is the prince. Mainly because his twinner died at birth, or shortly after birth. I should say it was probably like 1 to 2 years old was whenever his twin died in the territories. And so the kid that's called Jason in multiple places, he has to try to make things right for himself by finding the talisman and going on this huge adventure. And it is a very nice kind of D&D reminiscent adventure where he has multiple characters he runs into at different places at different times and are different versions of themselves, with the exception of one, which I really, really liked that guy. But are they the same book? No, they're not. They do have some similarities because they were wrote by the same individual, but beyond that, there is so much in this book that if you've never read Stephen King and you do like sci-fi, I would say go for it. You are not going to regret your decision. So is it worth your time, efforts, and energies? It most certainly is. It is an incredible read. I will certainly go back to it again and read it again. Same thing with Fairytale. I think that Stephen King is finally getting back into it for what I like. That doesn't mean that he hasn't been writing and he hasn't been doing a good job with it. It's just a lot of the stories here of late just haven't been my kind of a style. But Fairytale, man, he hit it on the head for me on that one. So the question remains, what about this book was the magic? It was the way that the kid was followed, the narration style, the production of the book. All these things all lent themselves to each other, and it all came together in a remarkable package, and I really loved listening to this one. Usually I don't gush about that kind of a thing, but it was in the timing, it was in the speech, it was in the way that this gentleman narrated these books. There's a timelessness to his voice. It's not like a voice of honey. It's not this. It doesn't sound like a remarkable voice. You can tell he's an older gentleman, but man, I do miss the way that he narrated. Yeah, Frank Mueller. And I think this is the narrator that Stephen King used for the longest time. And there was a reason why. I mean, it shows in his craft that he cared very much so. Yeah, but anyway. So the main motivation for the kid that goes by Jason in multiple territories is that his mom has cancer and he's trying to save her. There's a couple of kind of grandiose sci-fi things where something is preventing or trying to prevent him from doing it. You know, it comes in voices, or it comes across in a telephone conversation, or it comes in through a situation that's designed as a trap to hold him where he is, to keep him from being able to achieve the things that he needs to achieve for not only himself or his mother, or for the territories, or for the queen of the territories. But it's interesting to see how towards the end he starts to realize how all these things click together and how he actually does have power. And how true is that in life? Because we all have a power inside of us to sometimes get through things that we wouldn't suspect that we could, and or to become greater versions of ourselves than we thought that we ever could. So that is the fantasy part of it that I absolutely love to see unfold, was him empowering himself through these things and seeing how, even though this is what's expected, it doesn't mean that this is the way that it has to be. And how can I change what I'm doing? So there's multiple times where he just leaves that situation or betters himself by going here and doing this, even though it's not the easy answer, but it's the one he knows is correct. So he does it anyway. So for being true to that character and the morality of that character, the exploration, the details whenever it comes to like particular funguses that are growing in these places that are thin, between the two worlds being the territories and the universe that this kid is living in, the way that these little things, like for instance, there's these bugs that comes out of this fungus that I was just mentioning, right? And there's one character that's always been a little bit maybe overweight in his own mind, and he's always been a little bit awkward in this, that, and the other. But after experiencing these bugs coming through this fungus, he ends up losing a lot of weight, and he becomes more confident in himself, and he starts to be a better version of himself. Even though he's not a main character, I love the fact that Stephen King put that information in that book, because he's really guilty of diarrhea of the typewriter, or diarrhea of the lower lip, as he refers to it as. A lot of the times whenever he has a book that's revised, it's not getting thinner, it's getting thicker because he's adding more to it. And I know that that's got to be a bane for his editors, but I really liked it this time, because those are the things that can make a book. And by God, he made this book with that. And granted, this is not a new book at all, but he understood that philosophy way back then, and he did such a great job with it. And so I applaud Stephen King for this book. I know that it is old news. I know that this book has been around for a long time. So let's ask a different question. Is this book relevant in today's society? I think so. I really do. I don't think that there's anything that really dates it, with the exception of some of the language, but we have to look at the time period that this book was supposed to be in. And for that time period, the language that was there, it wasn't overused for sure. But there was enough of it in there to remind you, especially if you were a 70s, born in the 70s or 60s or whatever, you will remember some of these things, and it's not a nostalgia, it's an anti-nostalgia, more like, where it still is such a hard hit thing whenever it's used. And because of the sparsity of it, I applaud him for that, because that added to the details of the universe without browbeating the details of the universe into our minds. So if you've experienced that kind of racism yourself, then whenever those things are brought up, yeah, it kind of sucks. But on the same token, yes, this puts us back into, the 50s, 60s, 70s, the 40s, 30s, whatever. And the way that it was done, it was artful. So I don't really have a problem with it, with the exception of, I just don't like that word. I just don't. Everybody's got a word they don't like. Like some people hate the word moist. Let me get in on the microphone and say this. Moist. Some people hate that word. Yeah, that's the way I feel about the hard R. I just don't like it. It's not really needed. We either need to all use it or nobody uses it. One of the two. We just need to move on from that, really, so we can move on and finally become that one culture. Like let's finally hit that level 1 society where governments have been united and we don't have a problem with that kind of a thing anymore, and we're able to harness the entire energy of our planet and our solar system. That would be cool. Boy, where we could go from there. But we got to let go of things, and we've got to grow from the things that happened. We need to respect the things that happened, not just push them under a rug, but vow to never repeat them. That's the key. But we'll see where we get with that. Utopia, right? Anyway, I digress. So this book overall is a really, really good read. I really appreciate Jose Bro for asking me to not necessarily read it, but are these two the same? And I drew a blank whenever he asked the question, because I was just like, I don't remember the Talisman. I've heard of it. I know it exists. I think I know the premises of it. But as I started to read it, I knew I had never read that before, especially with Wolfie. Wolfie was probably one of my characters that I loved the most. And if you read the book, I think that it will either annoy you to the point of resignation, and then you'll like them, or you'll just love them from the get-go. I'm not sure which. But that's the question of the week, is whenever you read the book, or if you have read the book, what do you think of Wolfie? I'd love to know. Please tell me down there in the doobly-doo, as some YouTubers used to call it, or the comment section, even though they're making it harder and harder to get to, it seems. But I do appreciate each and every one of you that leave a comment. That's incredible. Thank you so much. It's really what keeps me going on this little journey. So thank you for being awesome. I really appreciate those comments. I'm not sure which one of these videos that's coming in that you'll pick, but if you happen to pick that one up there, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.